right, Elijah and the prophets of Baal. This is one of the great stories of the Old Testament. Beginning of chapter 18. After many days, the word of the Lord came to Elijah in the 3rd year of the famine, saying, "Go, show yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain upon the earth." Despite the danger to his life, Elijah obeyed God. There's a rather funny moment here. Ahab and his royal steward Obadiah are out walking separately, searching for some patch of grass that's still around that might feed the royal horses. There's no grass left anywhere.
Not the people, the horses.
The horses. Yeah, you gotta have your priorities straight. Now, interestingly enough, Obadiah was faithful to God. While Ahab and Jezebel were massacring the prophets of God, Obadiah found 100 prophets and hid them in caves and supplied them with bread and water. So Elijah approaches Obadiah. Obadiah falls flat on his face and says, "Is it you, my lord Elijah?" Elijah says, "It is I. Go, tell your lord, Elijah is here." Obadiah refuses, saying, "No way!" That's my translation. "If I do that, the Spirit of the Lord will whisk you away to some distant location, and when I bring Ahab here, you'll be long gone, and he'll have my head for not capturing you." So Elijah promises him he'll be good, he'll stay put, and Obadiah runs to fetch King Ahab. When Ahab arrives, he scowls, "Is that you, O troubler of Israel?" Elijah rails back at him, "I have not troubled Israel, but you have, for you have followed the Baals." So Elijah challenges Ahab to a showdown at Mount Carmel. Elijah versus the 450 prophets of Baal, and the 400 prophets of Ashtoreth, and anyone else that wanted to show up. Ahab accepts, and he invites all the people of Israel to come witness the showdown. Clearly he thought he was going to crush Elijah, this one guy, into the ground. On Mount Carmel, Elijah challenges the people, saying, "How long will you go limping with 2 different opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. If Baal is God, follow him." The people have no answer. Then Elijah proposes that he and the prophets of Baal each choose a bull, sacrifice it, place it on a stack of wood, and ask their God to rain fire down from heaven and consume the sacrifice. Now, Baal is the god of lightning as well as rain, so they readily agree to this. They go first. They sacrifice their bull, and all day long they dance around the altar, mutilating themselves with knives, spilling their blood, trying to provoke an answer from Baal. "Pay attention to us!" Probably he has answered some of their prayers in the past, which is a creepy idea. But this time, nothing happens. Elijah mocks them. "Shout louder! Maybe your God is hard of hearing. Maybe he's on vacation. Maybe he's taking a nap. Maybe he's going to the bathroom." My kids love this part of the story. Finally, it's Elijah's turn. He builds an altar to the Lord with 12 stones for the 12 tribes of Israel. He lays the bull on the wood. Then he digs a trench around the altar and says, "Bring me 4 jugs of water." The people pour water over the sacrifice while it runs down into the trench, and Elijah says, "Do it again and again until the whole area is so soaked with water there is no way the sacrifice is ever going to burn by human hands." As soon as Elijah prays, "Oh God, show these people that you are God," bam! God sends fire down from heaven that consumes not only the sacrifice, but the altar, the wood, and vaporizes all the water in the trench. The people of Israel fall flat on their faces and shout, "Yahweh is God! Yahweh is God!" And Elijah shouts, "Seize the prophets of Baal!" The people of Israel seize and kill all the prophets of Baal. This is in accordance with the law of Moses, where false prophets who lead Israel into idolatry are subject to the death penalty. Here it's applied on a dramatic scale. That's brutal. And yet, it was the only way to keep the people following God. Let's see. Then Elijah tells Ahab, "You'd better get home quickly before you're caught in the rain." Then, man of great faith, Elijah goes off and prays for rain. Don't make a liar out of me, God. He prays hard. He keeps sending his servant out. Go look over the edge of the cliff there. Go see if there's any clouds forming over the sea. After the 7th time he sends his servant out, the servant says, "I see a cloud the size of a man's hand." Elijah goes, "Okay, great, that did it. Prayer answered." The sky turns black, the wind rises, and the Spirit of the Lord whisks Elijah back to Jezreel faster than any human being could possibly run. Meanwhile, Ahab rides his chariot back to his palace in Jezreel in the pouring rain, soaked to the bone, wheels getting stuck in the mud. It's the first rain Israel has seen in 3 years. This is a tremendous victory for Elijah. For God, for the people of Israel. They now know, after all these years of being separated from them, who their God is again. How do you think Elijah feels after a day like that?
Tired.
Say that again? Stoked.
Vindicated.
Tired. Vindicated. Exhilarated. Triumphant.
Wet.
Yeah, maybe wet. Yeah, no, I think he ran through the raindrops by the sound of it. Maybe for a few hours. Then Jezebel hears what happens. And she swears she's going to hunt Elijah down until he is dead, dead, dead. May the gods do as much to me and more also if I do not make you as one of the prophets of Baal by the end of the day. Elijah runs. Within days of the great victory that deals a tremendous blow to Baal worship in Israel, Elijah staggers into Beersheba, all the way down in the south, far southern tip of Judah. He's overwhelmed with fear and exhaustion. He collapses under a tree, and he says to God, "Let me die." Recognize that it just doesn't make any sense at this point for Elijah to suddenly succumb to despair. He just won the most tremendous victory for God of his life. Besides, people have been trying to kill him for years. It doesn't seem to have gotten to him until now. But suddenly, he's afraid. He's exhausted. He's done. What's going on here? This is spiritual warfare. It is very common for the devil to try and discourage us mightily when we are fighting him, when we are taking back his territory for God, just like Elijah brought all those people in Israel back to God. The Pentecostal tradition my husband grew up in actually calls this the Jezebel spirit, when the devil shows up in force just before, just after some great spiritual victory. This is a pattern. I can see why they gave a name to it. In what form does the devil show up? Often in the same way he did for Elijah. Inexplicable discouragement, despair, depression, nagging thoughts of self-loathing. I'm wasting my time. I might as well give up. Why keep on doing what I'm doing? The person I'm helping, they're just going to go back to the same self-destructive behavior. Why am I teaching this religious ed class? It's not making a difference. Nothing I do makes a difference. Thoughts like these are lies from the father of lies. We really do make a difference. Recognize these thoughts when they come for what they are. Do your best not to let despairing thoughts get a foothold. Pray extravagantly, like Elijah did. March around, pray some psalms. Be gentle with yourself. Recognize, okay, I'm being tempted right now. This is hard. This is going to pass. God is with me. God will save me. Wait for God to show up. The light does return. I was talking about this with a friend who was just commissioned as a lay ecclesial minister along with me this past spring in the after the Common Formation program. We were at the cathedral, and afterwards he told me that the entire time that the ceremony was going on, She was incredibly irritable and just flooded with thoughts of her own unworthiness. What am I doing here? They knew who I really was. They kicked me out of this building. And she's a great person. She's a lovely person. She's not even a person that's prone to any kind of dramatic mood swings. And she didn't understand where all this nastiness was coming from. And we talked about this, and she said that was absolutely an attack of the devil.
I think it's bigger than we realize.
It is.
This kind of thing happens so often, and it's something people often don't recognize. I got to tell you, when I realized, I'm teaching Elijah this week, I went, this is going to be great. Then I went, this is going to be bad. Yeah, sure enough, this past week's been rough. Last 6 days out of 8, I've woken up with awful nightmares. It's just the devil's way of harassing me before a class. And I know Elijah's a target class. He doesn't like when we recognize what's going on. And yet, Elijah lets the thoughts of despair come in, because we all do sometimes, because we're weak, because we're human. So Elijah prays for death, and then he falls asleep. What does God do? Does God rebuke him for his weakness? Elijah, you shouldn't have run away. You should have trusted me to protect you. Not hardly.
No.
God is gracious and merciful. God sends an angel to comfort him and to bring him bread and water. Get up and eat, the angel says, or else the journey will be too much for you. Elijah eats and drinks, goes back to sleep, wakes up again, sees that the angel has brought more food. God knows. Good food, good rest, good night's sleep will do wonders for a fit of despair. After eating that bread of angels, Elijah feels stronger. And he walks through the desert for 40 days and 40 nights until he reaches Mount Horeb, better known as Mount Sinai. Mount Horeb, Mount Sinai, 2 names for the same mountain. You all know what mountain this is, right? The mountain of the 10 Commandments. So, you already brought this up. Does this situation ring a bell? 40 days and 40 nights wandering in the wilderness. What Old Testament character was fed with bread from heaven and water from a rock, then wandered through the desert and spent 40 days and 40 nights on Mount Sinai without food or drink? Moses, you win! What New Testament character spent 40 days and 40 nights in the desert without food or water, undergoing temptation from the devil, and was ministered to by angels? Jesus! You got the answer! You win the Sunday school prize! Why does Elijah come to Mount Sinai? He is still in great despair, and he wants to hear from God. He wants to meet with God. In the days of Moses, God's presence made Sinai quake. God wreathed it in fire and lightning and spoke in a great booming voice. Maybe, just maybe, Elijah thinks, he'll do it again. He's come to find God. So Elijah climbs up into a cave on the mountain, perhaps the same cave where Moses asked God if he could see his glory pass by. And the word of the Lord comes to him. What are you doing here, Elijah? Elijah says to God, I've done so much for you, Lord, but Jezebel has killed all your prophets, and she's going to kill me too. And then the Lord passed by. A strong wind tore the mountain, and the rocks broke in pieces before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind came an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a still, small voice. What are you doing here, Elijah? I've done so much for you, Lord, replies Elijah. But Jezebel has killed all your prophets, and she's going to kill me too. Same question, same answer. It's funny. God gave Elijah the entire sound and light show, presumably what he came to Mount Sinai for, and it didn't make a bit of difference. Elijah is still in despair. Sometimes we think that if only we saw the glory of God, if we experienced the voice from heaven, we could trust God for the rest of our lives and never be sad or doubting again. And yet we do see the glory of God. Elijah saw it on Mount Carmel when he defeated the prophets of Baal. We too have seen God working in our own lives. It really helps us to identify those moments and hang on to those memories to remember when we get discouraged. I know God exists. I know God is with me. I've seen it. I've experienced this. And yet sometimes we have short memories and we still grow discouraged. Because we're tempted, because we're human. So God has mercy on poor Elijah and encourages him. The still small voice does what all the wonders of Mount Carmel and Mount Sinai could not. God tells Elijah, you're not alone. You're not the only one left. There are 7,000 people still in Israel who have not bowed to Baal. Then God gives Elijah a new mission. This lets him know God's still got a plan for him. Jezebel's not going to kill him. God is still working through him. And then God gives Elijah a friend. He tells him to go find a man named Elisha and anoint him to be his successor. Elijah and Elisha stick together for the rest of Elijah's life. The moral of the story I'm going to pick out of that is, God carried Elijah through his discouragement every step of the way. Look to God when you're discouraged. Ask him to give you his perspective on things, the prophet's perspective, right? Seeing with the eyes of God. Ask him to carry you. We may or may not feel instant relief, but we can always look back and see God got me through that.